if I'm a spirit, and I used to live on this planet, on Earth, so here's Earth, and I pass into the spirit world, so I'm now in the first dimension, the first sphere, let's call it, of the spirit world that's associated with this. So this is multi-dimensional space associated with the physical, this physical universe, if you like, and this is the first dimensional space surrounding the Earth. And if I'm a spirit who's passed over into the spirit world with poor development in love, I will probably arrive at that location. Now, in that location, there's all sorts of things happening. Like, for example, there's towns and cities, and there's people who still believe they're in war with each other, and there's all sorts of things going on in that dimension. It doesn't mean that that's truthful. It just means it's what's happening in that particular dimension. It's not all the truth. Now, if I could arrive into the second dimension of the spirit world, or the second sphere, then many of the things that are happening in the first don't happen in the second. So, for example, there are no wars in the second dimension of the spirit world. There's no people who believe themselves to be still fighting with anyone. Does that make sense? Because they've had to get to a certain condition of love and therefore stop fighting to get to the second dimension. And so the second dimension is a more loving space than the first. And then, of course, there's a third dimension, or third sphere. And every 7 dimensions contain a major transition. So there's a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th, and the transition between the 7th and 8th is a major dimensional shift, right? And they are separated by large interstellar boundaries as a result. You can't cross them unless you're in a certain condition of love. The first 7 of these surrounding our Earth, you could call... you could come up with a lot of names for them, but they're really spheres of probation. Do you know what I mean by that? Probation. Is that right? Probation. In that, they're sort of like having a P plate instead of having your driver's license. Does that make sense? And so you progress up through these dimensions, and by the time you hit the 7th sphere, you've now learnt a bit about divine love, and you've also started to change at the soul level. But with the transition between the 7th and the 8th sphere, which is the 7th sphere transition, so every 7 spheres there's a major transition. In the transition between the 7th and the 8th, you go out of probation and you get your license, right? Now, that is the shift into what I called in the first century becoming at one with God. In other words, all of my emotions no longer are relating to any unhealed, unloving emotion within myself, but now they're all healed. All of my emotions are healed in some way, and I'm at one with God in the sense that I'm permanently connected with God. I can feel that permanent connection once I reach that condition. So once I reached that condition in the first century, I was 31 years of age then, and I became baptised because I decided to be, as a sign that that had actually occurred for my own sake. And that meant I'd finished my probation. Does that make sense? But there are spheres above that, dimensions above that, and you make another transition in the 15th, right? And then if you add another 7 to that, you can see you'll make another transition in the 22nd that is a major transaction, and so forth. And there are major dimensions, they're still above, the 29th, and the 36th that I know about at this point. And this sphere, these are all major transitions, points of major transitions that we make. Now, how does that relate to the physical universe? How it relates is that every single one of these physical universes, once you get to this state of this dimensional space, the dimensional spaces around the physical universes start to amalgamate with each other. So what happens above this dimension, which is the soul union condition, from that dimensional space onwards, you can now speak with and communicate with and directly interact with the people from the other universes. Right? So you can actually have communication with them, speak with them, share time, good times with them, and so forth. So myself and Mary have met other Jesuses, if you like. The first person who ever discovered divine love on a planet is sort of like myself in all of these other planets. And we've met them and had interactions with them and actually feel closer to them than we do to many other people because they have exactly the same experience that we've had. So this is a part of this this process, if you like. Now, in terms of the actual universe, the physical universe, every one of these physical universes, these slices, if you like, in the total circulating, rotating forces, they all have their own interdimensional space surrounding them until you get to a point where you've developed enough in love where you can meet each other.